So are we going to talk about design today, finally?
I got some notes.
Okay. I got notes, but every time you go, Bob, you change the whole subject.
Yeah, that's true. I might. How's it going?
I'm going good. I got all 3 of my videos done. Remember last week we talked about I have to do 3 videos? I did 3 videos.
I watched one, and then like the next day another video pops up. I'm like, whoa, Jimmy is putting out.
Everybody thinks a couple of guys called me. They're like, "Are you desperately trying to like regain your footing on YouTube?" I was like, "No, I just had 3 obligations that came together at the same."
Why? Yes, I am.
I mean, we've been doing that for the last 8 years, trying to regain our footing on YouTube.
Yeah. Well, we know the CPMs go up in November and December for Christmas, so
that's true.
Now's a good time to put out a bunch of videos.
Is that true? You know, after all this time, I never really paid attention to those patterns. That's good to know.
Oh, absolutely. So they go up around this time of year. They drop to basically 0 in January and February. Mm-hmm. And they start kind of climbing back up until summer when they drop again. And then they start climbing back up. Yeah.
All right. Maybe I'll put 3 videos out a week. I'll just keep going. The videos are performing okay. They're a little above average for, where we're all at, or at least where I'm at in the cycle of YouTube life. They're doing okay. And like I keep saying, I'm just adding to my library of content, anticipating something changing one day, 1 year, and just having a big bulk of content to be able to do something with, license or whatever. But they were all paid spots, so whether they perform or not, I made some pretty decent money on them, and I'm really happy with what I made. So that's good too.
Yeah, that is good. I mean, that's the important part, right?
Yeah. And what else? And now I'm going to go work at the graveyard house this week. I don't think I'll have a video out Saturday. I think I've earned the right to take a Saturday off.
Nope, you set a precedent. 3 videos a week from now until you die. That's the way it goes.
Yeah, God. I could probably do that, actually.
Please.
Just have to stop talking to people. Yeah. And I'm making my leather bags. That's kind of a behind-the-scenes thing. I'm also going to start, I think I might have told you this maybe on the after show last week. I'm going to start creating some exclusive content just for Patreon, because there's lots of videos that are going to be 10 of 10 no matter what I do, no matter what. So I'm just going to put them on Patreon because they're still good content, but YouTube algorithm doesn't like them. And the best I could do is just keep making cool things because it's a good document. And so I'm going to start. So I have a video about me making these bags, which would probably get about 8 views on YouTube. But I'm going to show that on Patreon. So I'm working on a couple of videos that will only be on Patreon. And just chugging along here, getting ready for the winter. It's starting to get cold. I walked the dogs this morning. I have the dogs here, so I'll keep muting myself. They're going to bark as soon as the housekeeper shows up. And I walked outside and it was snowing out.
Whoa.
Yeah.
November 1st, it starts snowing. It's crazy. It's like, why does it have to be like that? Why can't it change? Why does it have to be like that?
Whoa.
Everything is covered in snow here.
What?
Yeah.
Crazy.
It's dumb.
Wow. Dumb.
But it was puddles
October
aren't
yesterday.
frozen. Yeah,
it was
puddles
October
aren't
yesterday,
frozen or
not-
anything.
Yeah.
But speaking of, happy anniversary.
Oh,
To-
that's
to you
right.
both.
Right.
Is it 12 years now? 14 years?
155 years we've been doing this
13
podcast.
years.
This is
16,
yesterday. Yeah.
12 years. I think it's really
How long
9.
has it? Is it? Did we actually figure it out?
I think it's 9.
I think it's
9?
9.
Yeah.
Golly, that's crazy.
That's unbelievable.
I must really like you guys.
I still feel like we're just figuring this out.
Yeah, absolutely.
All of it, like everything, the podcast,
The whole thing. Yeah.
YouTube.
Huh. Did you guys go trick-or-treating to celebrate last night?
No.
Yeah, I hung out in Woodstock, New York. There's lots of Woodstock. If anybody knows Woodstock, New York, from the concert, the Woodstock concert is about 20 miles away from me, and I went over there with some friends. It was fun. The whole town
Get some good candy.
Yeah, of course.
Good,
And the whole town turns into. And the funniest thing we had like pizza at this outdoor thing, me and some friends, and we're hanging out, and kind of right in my eyes view is a guy dressed up as a zombie, and his wife dressed up as Barbie, and they were kind of like right in my eye view the whole time, and I didn't see them at all paying attention to me. But as I was leaving, the zombie comes over to me and he goes, "I have to say something. I'm a huge fan." It was really nice. I didn't see him paying attention to me at all. Like
You're like, no, this is the costume.
Yeah. I'm a costume of Jimmy Diresta.
My name is Derek. I'm dressed up as Jimmy.
I said zombie. He was dressed up as a mummy. So he had like a full mummy suit on.
Well, see, I was making like a zombie noise, like he was gonna like eat your brains. Like that would have been funnier.
Mummies eat brains too. So, but the reason I bring it up is because I was looking at his mummy costume and looking about like how it was made. It was really made well. It was something he bought, but because there was like a tag on it. But it was really well made, and like there was a zipper up the back, and I was just like deconstructing it in my mind the whole time. The conversation kind of diminished, and then I would go back and I keep looking at his, and then all of a sudden he walked over to me. I thought he was going to be like, "Why are you talking? Why are you looking at my zombie costume like that, bro?" mummy costume.
Come at me.
It's funny because those two things are not interchangeable. Although I guess if you think about it, like the mummies from movies are zombies because they're dead, but then they come back. So, interesting.
Yeah. Mummy.
You knew something I had never even thought about.
Mummy and Daddy. No, so it was a good night, and now I'm back, and I have the dogs for a couple days, and they're gonna go bananas a few times. So I'll do my best to mute them. Occasionally, when they hear noises outside, one goes, and then they all go. I have 3, so they're two little ones and a big one. So
Crazy.
that's it. And then what am I going to work on? The Alan Teeter house. That's the road. The house is on the graveyard house. I'm going to go work on the graveyard house after we're done. I have to start setting the sill plates for the extension that I'm restoring.
So, question about that. As the weather changes for you, that house is very exposed. I would assume it's still very exposed.
It is. Like the foundation wall is beginning to get closed up, actually. So it's.
Is that going to slow you down, or are you going to kind of take a lot of the winter off, or are you just going to keep trucking through the cold weather?
As long as there's the cold doesn't bother me. As long as there's no snow and ice, I could keep moving along. Yeah. It should be okay. The
it
heat
affects
is off.
concrete and things like that. So if you had to do any work like that.
Yeah, no, we're doing the whole extension is a stone stack. The last couple of rows of stone are usually set in mortar to keep them from shifting. But the fact that they're setting mortar, all we need is like one warm day, above freezing. I think would be fine.
Gotcha.
And then the weather is so variable that we could have 280, 380 degree days. It's like so weird up here. This time last week it was 80 degrees.
Yeah.
Like 7 days ago. And now it's like 39 degrees. It's the craziest weather. It's 35 degrees right now, which is crazy to me. Yesterday it was like 70.
Thanks, Obama.
Well, what are you doing in the snow? Did you play in the snow this morning, David?
No. So I've been doing a morning walk, at least 1 mile, sometimes 2 miles every morning since mid-July. And I skipped today because of snow. And if you're listening to this podcast in the future, it is November 1st. It should be at least 50 degrees outside and not snowing.
So what's your plan for the cold weather in regards to that, to keeping that
snowshoes
thing up?
I'm gonna try to push through it, and then on really cold or really snowy days, I'll just hop on the elliptical. And we've got a really good routine, and the morning walk has become just part of my morning. I wake up, and I'm usually walking within 5 minutes of waking up. It's just like before I can even think about not wanting to do it, except today, of course. I just do it. And then a little 10-minute walk after lunch, a little 10-minute walk after dinner, and then fasting, so no food after 8, and then no food before noon. So usually a 16-hour fast every day. And my aches and pains, what I thought was arthritis, was probably just inflammation. Like my feet and back feel so much better. And I've also been doing this barefoot shoe thing. It's like a minimalist shoe. I've had a lot of foot pain over the last few years, and so I bought special old people shoes, just a lot of money on specialty shoes. And then I watched a couple of videos on how that treats more of the symptoms and not the cause. So I went completely barefoot and then started doing foot exercises to strengthen my feet, and that has changed everything. I feel so much better. So if you have sore feet all the time, you might want to look into barefoot shoes. But it takes a few weeks to get used to barefoot shoes. You can actually injure yourself if you just jump into it right away. So the shoes are perfectly flat. They're really flexible, and the toe box is really big, so your toes don't touch the end of the shoe. They look goofy, but they have changed my life. And so I don't know how I got onto that, but that's lifestyle changes and actually feel
new
much
routines.
better. Yeah.
That's great. That's amazing.
And speaking of new routines, we got the keys to our rental house. So that has...
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's so freaking exciting. We got the keys.
I want to clear that up. You actually own it. You're buying it so that you can rent it.
Yes. Yep.
Because when I had my house and I would say, oh yeah, I rent it all the time. People are like, why don't you just buy a house? Why do you rent one all the time? I go, no, it's my house I own that I rent out for income. So that was a conversation I used to have all the time.
I should come up with a better phrase or a better term for it so it's not confusing.
Yeah.
Call it rental property.
Rental.
It sounds like,
Oh yeah, it's all profesh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the plan is it's going to be a short-term rental, and it's going to be a slow build over the next year. We'll rebuild all the furniture, and so I can't rent it out until I build all the furniture. So it's super exciting. It feels like it's going to take forever, but I think that's part of the fun of it. And so the very first project that we're working on right now is there's no places to sit, and there's a little bar from the living room to the kitchen. So I'm building 2 bar stools, and they're coming out really nice. And the next Friday we're going to work on this bent wood lamination seat for it. And I'm trying to make plans for this as I go, and a lot of the furniture I want to do plans for. So there should be a whole lot of plans in the future. Plans have been a very good source of income for me for the last 10 years, but I rarely make them now because they take so much time. So I'm trying to figure out how to streamline that into my workflow.
Yeah. Yeah, I just thought not to go on that topic at all, but to go back, it would have been really cool if you had saved the Simon thing for the bar stools, because then you could have had Simon bar stools that you have to play by sitting on it and moving around. But whatever. That's a terrible idea.
Oh yeah. Imagine how the beauty shots would look on that.
Oh yeah.
Just like butts moving and wiggling around on it. Yeah.
Yep. Well, somebody else can have that idea.
Yeah. It's all yours.
That's cool, man. That's exciting.
Yes.
That's pretty great. Let's see. For me, what have I been doing? I went to LBX. I went to the Lightburn conference. I was like, there's this big block of time that I'm missing, and it's because I wasn't here. So I got invited to speak at the Lightburn conference. It's kind of a users conference, and there were I think they capped it at 500 people, so it wasn't huge. It was a nice size. Matt said to tell you hi, David. He missed you, and he was really hoping that you had been there.
Oh.
So
he's an employee of Lightburn, correct?
Yes, he is. I'm not exactly sure what his position is, but yeah, he was there kind of running the whole thing, and it was good to see him. I hadn't seen him in a while. But I got to meet a lot of not all of the dev team, but a lot of the dev team. They were all there. I just didn't get to meet them all. And they were super hands-on. They were, always around. They were in a lot of the talks. They did a panel where they answered questions for users. And this was a really different kind of audience or attendee group, because, the things that we're used to going to are more general, like, type of person event. They're like makers, or woodworkers or whatever. So they're a type of person. This was users of a piece of software. And so they do have a lot in common, because they all owned lasers, and they all use those lasers to make stuff. But, the intent behind what they were doing and how they got there and what they did with it, and whether it was a moneymaker or a hobby, or it was a really interesting. It felt like that place was a little confluence of a bunch of things that just happened to cross over in this one little spot. But, it wasn't the same as going to the other events. Not in a good way or bad way. It was just different. And I didn't know what to expect as far as who would go to something like this. And the only common thing really was that they had a laser and that they were users of the software. And so it was kind of neat to be there and not really know anybody. I knew a few people, but to just be an attendee at something. And I did speak, but the rest of the time I was just kind of walking around. I went to a couple classes. I did a podcast with Alan from Repcord. He was there. We got to hang out a lot for the first time, which was really cool. Great guy. And got to spend some time with Bernie and Chad, who are two of our awesome patrons and good friends. And
One of the many Chads.
Yes, one of the many Chads. They were both there and got to hang out a lot with them, and that was really cool. Got to see Jen Schechter. Spent some time with her, with Winston Moy. Hadn't seen him in many years. It was good to see him. Really, I think that was... No, Gil was there, and... I'm trying to think. I probably knew one or two other people, other than like Matt. But of 500 people, I didn't know that many people, and it was kind of cool. I don't know. It was nice to go go somewhere and just like, be a part of it.
I see a lot of videos come up in my feed about make money with your laser, make money with your CNC, and which is, I'm sure, very possible. But have we hit the bubble of where lasers and CNCs are a little bit more common and affordable? And can you still buy one thinking that you can start a business with one?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think there are, and in fact, my talk was about making the most of the machine that you have, and not just about making products, but end to end. How do you think through coming up with ideas for products, all the way down to making your own organization for your shop, making your own packaging, making your own, like templates, making templates for other people, all these different ideas. And the point was to try to kickstart them. Like, they probably bought a laser thinking, I'm going to make tumblers, or I'm going to make puzzles, or whatever. And so I was trying to help people understand that if you can pick an area and think about it a little bit differently and look for problems to solve, there's a lot more than you can do with it than what you originally thought. And I think that translates to, the number of people there, the number of people that have machines that are getting these machines. I think there's a lot of opportunity for them to be used in many, many different ways. And so I think there are still businesses to be made and products to be made. In fact, yesterday, I was at a local juice bar. So a friend of ours owns this juice bar here in town. And I was talking to her about, hey, would it be helpful if I made you a little carrier? She has these bottles. She juices stuff. She puts it in these glass bottles. I said, would it be helpful if I made these little carriers for you to be able to put these in so you can organize them, or whatever. And I was just trying to be helpful. And she said, actually, what I really need is this. And so she starts telling me about how she has hundreds of these bottles and they need to be stored in a certain way and a certain place. And it turned into, she had a really specific need and she did not have the tools to accomplish it. But I was like, well, I mean, I can make that happen like this afternoon. Like, we can be done with that and then your problem is solved. And it was all laser work, it was like super easy. Sit down in Illustrator for a few minutes and you're done. But I think it's one of those things where, to answer your original question, I think there's a lot still to be done with that type of tool if you go looking for problems to solve. I think that's the big thing. So, but the event was really cool. I met some new people, got to talk to a lot of people. I had quite a bit of time just to go to a hotel room and watch TV, which I know sounds kind of lame, but it was really nice. I watched Karate Kid by myself in a hotel room.
That's so funny.
And I was just like, this is really cool. Eating a bag of chips on a hotel room bed, just like watching TV. And I know that sounds lame, but man, it was nice to relax.
You probably weren't even worried about crumbs either, right?
I wasn't. I slept in those crumbs.
It didn't matter.
Yeah, it didn't matter at all. It was a good trip, though. And so I did that. That was, the weekend. That was Thursday to Sunday. And let's see, what else have I been working on? Oh, so here's I guess it's a complaint. I don't know. Here's a thing I'm doing that's not a lot of fun, but I hope somebody else can feel my pain. So we're trying to explore moving our online store from one service to another. I don't know if you've ever moved an online store from one service to another. Oh, you have your hand up, yes. David?
I just want to say I have been looking into it, and I'll let you finish. But
I'm gonna let you finish.
I'm gonna let you finish, but let me talk for 10 minutes first. There's a couple services that will go from one to the other, and I went through the whole like filling out the service form to see, and it was like, you have too many transactions. You need to speak to a representative and do something custom, which in my brain sounds like thousands of dollars.
Yes, I followed one of those paths as well, and by the time I got a quote from it, it was going to be $2,800, I think. Mm-hmm. And that was just a general, that still wasn't a very specific, like, person looked at the file and figured out whatever. So what I did find, though, is that we're looking at moving to Shopify, and I'm not sure that we're going to. I'm kind of testing it.
That was the same for
And they
us.
have a lot of tools. Okay, so they have a lot of tools to import things, and so it'll allow you to do it. We have 30,000 transactions in our store, and that's where it's not the products, it's not the customers, it's the transaction history. And so they have a limit of, oh gosh, I don't remember. It's like 5,000 transactions, and then you pay $50 a month and you can do 10,000 transactions. And so I'm like, well, I'll just do that one, and then I'll run the import a bunch of times, and it'll just bring in all the things. Well, it turns out it counts the transactions from the very beginning, even if it's already done them. So that won't work. It just keeps trying to import the first 10,000. Anyway, I've been trying to figure this thing out. I've been spending this extra time outside of all the other stuff that I should be doing on trying to get this thing moved to see if it will work. And it's beginning to feel very, like, a black hole of time kind of thing.
Have you thought about, so after I went through this, I'm like, you know what? Maybe I just eat it and I just start over fresh.
I have thought about that, because what we could do is import the products only. That's easy enough. It's already done. Leave the old store read-only somewhere. And so if you have purchases and you want to go back and see your, download your files or whatever, like, go to oldshop.iliketomakestuff.com, and then the new stuff just all starts over. And that would be easy enough to do. And in that, we could kind of break some things. We could say, we don't necessarily have to worry about all the weird custom variation stuff that we built before. You have really two separate entities. And it may get to that. But right now, I'm still trying to see if I can make it work. But I've been spending a lot of time on that. That's the only reason that came up. So I've been doing that, doing some modeling, working on a project.
When you say
out.
modeling, are you talking shirtless?
Not like, no, I keep my shirt on, obviously. It's hand modeling, so there's no reason to take the shirt off. No, I've been doing some Fusion 360 modeling and working on a project that'll be out in a couple weeks. And it's interesting because I'm trying to make this one for myself, but with manufacturability built into it. So it could be something that I could make on the laser. It could be something I have somebody make for me. And I think that came from being at this Lightburn conference and talking to some people about how people who don't make content as an end product, they just make a thing, and they're designing a thing with the intention of selling it from the very beginning. They have a really different perspective on what makes a good thing, right? It has a whole different set of constraints about being able to be cut out of materials that are inexpensive to get, that you can get consistently. And so it's just a whole different set of like requirements that go into it at the very beginning, rather than just like, I want it to look cool, or I want it to do the thing, and then work backwards from that to like, can I repeat this a bunch of times? So taking a little bit different tact on this one. And I don't know if it'll come through in the video or not, but I'm spending a different amount of time in the modeling process trying to make sure that I'm using materials that are consistent and checking for tolerances. I've been printing these little tolerance things on the printer to make sure that, the tabs will fit in the slots tightly and stuff like that. So it's been kind of cool, but that's pretty much what I'm into. And last night we went trick-or-treating and I walked around in my Optimus Prime helmet.
Nice.
And the Hobbit feet, some people were asking me, the Hobbit
I
feet
saw that on Instagram this morning.
did
Gross.
very well. but apparently were really uncomfortable. They were like the minimalist shoes that you were talking about. There was just like a rubber flat bottom, and he did not like them. So he walked around for a while, and then he got kind of sore. But
They were gross, though. That was funny.
oh, yeah, totally. Absolutely. All right, so we're going to talk about design today.
Yeah.
Yes. You had a specific question, though.
I did have a specific question. Man, I've been talking for a long time. So my specific question is, I went to art school. I started in graphic design, and then I realized pretty quickly that what I actually wanted to do was computer design, not necessarily like logo design. And, you know, designing layouts and things like that is more what I was starting school as, and then that changed and whatever. But now that I got through school, I learned a bunch of the basics. I learned a bunch of color theory. I learned a bunch of, like, you know, how to draw things and life drawing. And I have a good artistic base for stuff from school. But when it comes down to, I'm trying to find a good example. Since we're on video now, I can show things. When it comes down to, here's this logo. This is not a particularly good logo, but it's a logo that was near me. So this logo right here, there's an icon, and I can look at that, and I know why it's good or bad. I know how they got to it. I understand how to execute it. But getting to that thing from that, you know, blank, there's a big black hole there. And I feel like it's a skill that's not, and I know this isn't true, but I'm saying I feel like it's a skill that's not teachable. I feel like it's just this natural, like, oh, I have this inspiration for a logo and I'm going to draw this, whatever. I know that's not the truth. So tell me how to do that.
I can give you just a little bit. I can give you a little bit about.
Sure.
I took a logo design class, a corporate identity class, which is one of my favorite classes at school. I took it at the very end, and my teacher his name is Joe Finicaro. I don't know if he's famous or anything anymore. I haven't really kind of lost touch with him. I did see him at the museum one day. I was like, Joe, do you remember me? It was like 10 years after school, and he remembered me. Anyway, he was very successful in that world. Pre-computer, in our class, we had to make our logo big, like 12 inches. And that was a brand identity logo that would go right beside the title. And then you'd have to do the lockup. For instance, he did Prudential Insurance. He did that logo. It was like a get a piece of the rock. And they went through like a redesign. This was in 1989. And he was showing us a little bit of that. Like he swore us all to secrecy because nobody was allowed to talk about it. But we all looked at the new corporate identity. He only showed us like the day before they were about to reveal it, so it wasn't that big of a secret. But the new identity where they redid Get a Piece of the Rock, and it used to be like a real like photograph of a rock, and then it went from like a graphic representation and then even a more graphic representation. But when it comes down to doing a corporate identity for anybody, even if it's another maker or somebody, I always like to, for instance, I'll give you my process, and I learned it through Joe, is see what is the one definitive thing that might be throughout, whatever that subject matter is. For instance, Get a Piece of the Rock was their slogan, so they wanted their logo to be a rock. What is the thing? You know, Bob, if it's you, it's like, what is it? It's tech, and your logo that Forby did is tech. It's tech looking. And what do? You make stuff. You make tech stuff. So your logo is a real good marriage of tech visually and M for I like to make stuff, right? And I think you got to do is you basically just start writing down words. What are these words? You just start by writing down words. Like, what are all these things? You do a list. You try not to edit too quickly. Just do a free flow, write down words, and then start zeroing in on words and what those images begin to make for you. And it's all just pen and paper. It's not the computer just yet. I think you really need to do pen and paper for a little bit, and then whatever that process is for you. It could be a couple days, it could be a few minutes, and then you go to the computer and you start playing with fonts, and then you start figuring out what is that image. Again, this is for corporate logo, where you would have the name and usually a little icon. And also what's important is that how does that icon shrink? How does that icon look on a computer these days? I mean, that wasn't even a conversation when I was in Joe's class, but what does that look like on a web page? What does it look like on a business card, which nobody uses business cards anymore? But what does that logo look like when it keeps reappearing? How does it look like as a watermark on your photographs? You have to start asking yourself, and that's one of the biggest problems with maker logos is people will do a saw with crossed hammers, with a little tiny house, with a bird because you owned a bird, and you have a little picture of your daughter's name in the corner, and then all of a sudden you shrink it down and it's just like a little muddy mess.
Yeah.
And that's partly due to Joe's training. That's why my logo is just a set of fonts, because it looks really good tiny. I mean, it doesn't look so good tiny, which is why I don't put it on the ice pick. I don't put that logo. I don't put the stencil logo on the ice pick because it doesn't look good. When you stamp it, it looks like a bunch of little squiggles. So that's why I went to New Times Roman for the ice pick. And now that's sort of my classy logo. It's just a font solution. It's not a real logo. It's just, but when you begin to impress it over and over and over again, people begin to realize, oh, that's his logo. It's really just a font setup. And the one thing I don't have, and it's just kind of something I've always considered, I don't have like an iconic shape that people would see that shape and be like, oh, that's Jimmy. So
like
it's always
mark.
just, it's just always my whole name. I've tried in the past to make it just the D from the logo, but that doesn't really work well. It looks incomplete. I have the icon of the man. He's stuck on my computer, but the guy in the stained glass window is another one. But again, that gets a little muddy. That kind of happened by accident. But I do want to try and come up with like a one mark. It might be too late at this point, but
I don't think it is. I think people rebrand all the time, and so I think you could especially add to your branding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just haven't been able to come up with that one thing. That's that one symbol. But the simplification of all of my mumbling is you really got to start with the person you're working for. What is it that interests them? What do they want to say? And you just write a bunch of words down, and then from those words, see what those images start to turn into. And font is a big part of it. What does that font mean? When you see certain fonts, what does that mean to you? Mm-hmm. What emotion is evoked from certain fonts? What era do those fonts look? When you think about fonts like Helvetica, they were designed in the 30s and 40s, and it still looks like brand new font. It's crazy how timeless some certain fonts are. New Times Roman, lots of serif faces. You really got to just start looking through that and see what emotions are evoked from that. Like for instance, my logo is the stencil font. I liked it because it reminded me of the military and the idea of kind of ready to go, action, fast, quick. Those are all the things that evoke when I see the stencil font, and that's kind of why it kind of I gravitated towards it. So
it's interesting. So
all these different emotions that go into play. It's almost a gut feeling.
Yeah. So I took branding classes as well in school, and those are all things that like I know all of those things, and I can look at, like I was saying, I can look at a logo and tell why it's going to work or not work, and I can. Squinting was the thing we always did in class. So if you're working on a design and you want to see what it looks like small, or if you want to see how the colors translate, you squint at it and you keep squinting and get fuzzier and fuzzier until it goes out of focus and you can't tell what it is anymore. And that was kind of a gauge of how far away is this logo going to work, or how clouded can it be before you lose what it is, in other stuff. And so those types of things I think I get, and even sketching, sometimes I can kind of sketch to an idea, but I think it's the translation, and you said something that made me think of this. It's kind of the translation of I have a rough idea to I have a finished idea that looks nice, that is executed well. And I think there's like a technical
iteration. You just got to keep iterating.
I think in there for me, there's a technical missing component. Like I just don't know how to execute a logo idea that I have well. And I think because I often start on the computer, that technical thing gets in the way and makes it more frustrating rather than starting on paper. So you're right about that. Like I wouldn't have thought about it that way, but I think, you know what I mean? I think the missing skill on the computer stops me from making progress.
Well, it's funny because when the computer's design first came out, and it was in the early 90s when I was working at a toy company, I remember talking about this on here recently, that our artist went from paste up and mechanicals, which was touchy-feely, to computer, and everything he brought in looked like it was done on a computer. It looked like it was just cut out images out of magazines and stuck together. It looked horrible. But he hadn't developed... That's my dog. My housekeeper just came.
Gotcha.
Hold on. Dave, take it, Dave.
Sure. First of all, I will say that I took the assignment wrong. I thought we were going to. So most of my notes are about layout and design. I do have a couple.
Yeah, I mean that too. Go for
and
it.
so I went to school for graphic design. I graduated with a degree in graphic design. I wasn't the best graphic designer, and that's kind of why I transitioned into web development. But like you, I can see what is good and what is bad, and sometimes I have trouble coming up with my own. Actually, I think one of the logos I'm most proud of is actually the Making It logo. How all the letters line up perfectly with the little ruler tick marks. That's one of my better ones. So Jimmy said most of the things that I wanted to say, and it does start off with paper and pencil. There's something that's a little bit more magical about the physical, like don't even use a stylus and a tablet, like physical.
Yeah, that's
paper.
what I was going to say. That's what, before the dogs interrupted me, is that this artist, he wasn't doing the pen on paper first. He was jumping right to the computer and just making collages in the computer, and it lost a little bit of that human feel.
Mm-hmm.
Now I think we could kind of short circuit that now after 25, 30 years of using the computer. But in general, that was the initial thing. And then, if you're not used to hand drawing solutions, you might lose that a little bit. So that was my point that I was making before the dogs bark. And Dave, go ahead.
I think, and Jimmy kept using the word emotion and emotional, and that's really, really important because it should make you feel something. And to get there, that's the thing that's really hard to teach, and I think it just comes from experience. But as we were saying, it has to look good small, it has to look good big, it has to look good in color, it also has to look good in black and white because you never know. Maybe there's going to be print, and a lot of people skip that part. A lot of people who don't know skip that part.
Yeah.
So
if we're talking about logos, usually less is more.
Less is more. It's got to be.
You don't want to tell
simple.
every story. You don't want to tell every story. Like, remember the old business cards you get from somebody, and on one corner would be double crossed hammers, a saw in one corner, and a T-square in the other corner, and you'd be like, okay, you could just put the word carpenter, or you could just literally put a hammer. Like, there are certain icons that mean everything to that subject. Mm-hmm. And if you get down to the root of that, what it is, the other thing too is if you're a designer or an artist and you give out a business card that just says one thing, it gives you a little bit more liberal movement. Where it's like, oh, can you build a wall? Well, I don't build walls. Well, you have a T-square and a hammer here. Well, I only really build bathrooms. Like, then put a toilet or whatever. So
you should definitely put a toilet on your business card.
Yeah, hey, plumbers do it with pipes. Whatever, some stupid slogan.
If you look at somebody who draws figures, they don't start with like the eyes and get all detailed with the eyes and then do the rest of the part. You see big ovals, you see squares, and I think you have to break that down into its most simple forms.
I
think the best
start with some basics and then zero it in.
And
that's
even to
interesting.
get to
okay,
that.
so that can I go on that for just a second?
Please.
So one of the things that I think I talked about this a couple weeks ago, but one of the things that led to this is I was looking for a new hat, and I just wanted a hat that had a cool design on it. And I didn't really care. I don't want it to be brand or whatever. And so I started looking for hats. And I was trying to decide as I was looking through these different designed hats, like, why do I like this one? What is it that's interesting? And so I ended up with this one, and it's just this company I found that I'm not attached to in any way whatsoever. But it's a nice, simple icon.
Is that Paragon?
Trees. It's they're called Tripine. It's like 3 trees.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a simple iconography for anybody that's only listening. Some mountain. It's like a mountain range. Single color mountain range with 3 little trees in front of it, and then 3 colored stripes underneath it. And so, if I had sat down on the computer and if I had this image in my head, and I tried to design this from what I saw, I would not be able to execute it quickly, and I would get frustrated or whatever. But like you mentioned with the shapes, so if I had sat down and thought, well, I should start with some triangles and overlap the triangles to get the general proportion of these mountains to the trees. and then, start to refine those shapes. If I'd gone that way about it, I probably could have gotten close enough to this to where I could at least start to design over top of a sketch, or I could have given it to one of you all and said, hey, make this look nice, or something like that. But I think I'm skipping that type of step, the thing that you just said.
Yeah, there's a step even before that I think you might be skipping too. A lot of times we have that one good idea and we want to execute that idea. I think you need 10 good ideas that you can sketch out and then narrow it down from there to maybe there's 2 or 3, and then you take those to the next step where you're doing the shapes and stuff, and then when you can visually see, you got.
It's important to people get a gut instinct and then they go right for the idea. That might be your final idea. It might be, but you really need to take a different path, a few different ways to try and get to the same solution, just to explore. Because you really, if you just take that gut instinct and go for it, you might end up with something that's low hanging fruit. Which is just that gut instinct that you have is the same gut instinct. It's if you're not in a competition, it doesn't matter. But in a competition situation, like in class, for instance, I'd give out an assignment, and then that gut instinct 10 people have, 4 of them are going to be exactly the same. So that's why it's really important in that type of environment to spread your wings and go out a little bit, look around, come back. You might come back to that same idea and saying every idea I came up with isn't as good as my gut instinct, and that's okay. But it's important to run around a little bit, look and see the different types of things. When I say run around, I mean run around in your brain. Explore on the internet, Google image search, walk in the store. If it's a subject matter, like for instance, if you're designing something maker related, go to an aisle in the tool store and look down that aisle and see what jogs your inspiration. You might find inspiration in a tool that isn't the tool you're working on or the subject matter you're working on, but there are certain iconic images like the anvil, the hammer, certain iconic images that come up again. And it's funny, I was talking about, now that we're visual, I forgot that I had this logo here. This logo was born out of, and I didn't really design it. It was born out of, you guys remember there was a clip art line art company that was selling clip art about 8-9 years ago, and they reached out to a few YouTubers and they asked me to promote, and one of the things they said was, show our website, we're trying to sell our website, but grab something and make something off the clip art. And so I grabbed this icon, I changed it around a little bit. I added the stained glass, was another graphic that I added to it. It wasn't involved with it at all. That was because I had to make a stained glass window, so I took this icon. My first version of it was, it's the guy with the hammer and the anvil, and he's holding up the word I make. And it was just, everyone's like, well, you have like this Russian propagandist image. So I took it off this clip art side. I tweaked it a little bit and put my logo in it. And I was in a square. I think I made it in a circle. Anyway, after a long story, it's overusing it. It becomes mine. And so I forgot. I lost my point. Where I was going.
Yeah, but it's becoming, it started as one thing, and you've modified it to where it became the thing that you wanted to
Yeah,
use.
but I still, I mean, it's an image and it's fun for stickers, but it's not that one thing that I'm looking for. I guess the point I was making is you need to iterate. You can't just always go for your gut instinct.
Yeah, sure. So,
and then, by the way, we're talking about like logo design. We can also get into like 3D objects and stuff in a minute.
So I think that the logo thing is an interesting point, because I think I would have probably better luck at executing some of the stuff that you guys have mentioned and some of the stuff I learned in school. If it's like, I need to make, I don't know, a brand here, but here's the brand, make a logo for this brand. Yes, then you have a well of stuff that you can pull from. What do they do? Where are they from? What materials do they work in and stuff like that. There's actually an Aaron Draplin video that's really good about that, where he talks about a concrete company that he has to make this logo for. Mm-hmm. And he starts talking about the colors that you think of with concrete and, all this. And he goes through this whole process of sketching all these ideas and then executing them on the computer. But so a brand logo is one thing. It's all the same thing, but that's one path. The path that with the hat, the path I got to was, I want a cool image. I want a designed, it doesn't have to represent anything. It doesn't have to translate something to design. I just want I want to make a new t-shirt that just has a cool design on it. That's, I don't know, I'm making this up off the top of my head. That's about trees, and so there's no There's no like thing it has to convey. There's no thing it has to match. There's no attachment. It's just, I just want like a cool design. How do I get to that? I mean, I know it's similar in that I can sketch a bunch of trees and you get some general ideas and then you start to execute them on the computer, but it's so much more open-ended. And I think that's where I have a lot of trouble with just designing something that's just design.
I think
Does that make sense?
you should start mood. I've been really into mood boards lately, just collecting ideas, throwing them. I use a special note-taking app to create mine, but you could just grab a magazine, start clipping things, and making a collage of things that you like, and then you can like circle like, oh, I like how they did the trees here. Maybe I don't use a pine, maybe I use a maple tree, and translate that into, so it's, I mean, all art, all design is just borrowing from previous pieces of work. So it's just collecting ideas and then borrowing in an ethical way.
Yeah, right. I think the execution of it is probably the biggest hang up I have.
Then there's the technical part. Like, oh, how do I draw these curves? And then I think when you have the idea and then you start drawing it up in Illustrator, I started approaching Illustrator 15 years ago in the wrong way, where I thought I had to actually draw the thing, but a lot of good Illustrator techniques are subtracting. You draw one thing, put a shape over that, and then you subtract that. I don't know. Maybe I have some good resources to learn how to do that, but there's a lot of subtraction instead in making what you want to make within Illustrator.
Illustrator is fun to play with, where you start deconstructing words. If you spell out a word for a company, for instance, that you're working on a logo, and then start covering up parts of the word to see if you have a good, relatable, interesting image that also still communicates the words. This is more font, playing around with fonts, but at the same time, and I keep coming back to it because I know this is a lot of the people that are listening. If you have a logo with a saw, a hammer, a saw blade, a piece of wood, a silhouette of a carpenter in the background, take your logo and start deconstructing it. Take stuff away from it and start to see, like, what does it look like? Where does it look like a symbol that's like a nice, easy symbol that you could make really tiny, you could make really big, that looks good on a t-shirt without trying to tell an entire life story. You want to just tell one piece of an entire life story that is representative. And that's, you can start deconstructing stuff. So it's important once you come to a logo and you're like, I love that logo. Let me see, can I make it a little bit more, a quicker read by taking out the thing? Is somebody looking at this logo and getting distracted by this thing because I just like the way it looks, but it has nothing to do with my story? You know, it's a process. And you might deconstruct it and go, you know what? I don't like it. I want to go back to where it was, and that's fine too. But you got to. It's the same thing of getting off that familiar path and then at least exploring.
I'm going to put a link to that Aaron Draplin video because one of the things that he does there is he makes sure never to delete anything or even like change anything. So he'll design something and then he copies it.
I always put it off to the side. It's always off to the side. I never take one thing. He
copies it and changes the copy, and then copies that and changes the copy. So he has this history across of all the iterations, which is interesting because then if you're used to Fusion or something like that, where you can go backwards in time to see a previous version, but it's not right next to it. You know, it's you can. I guess you could do that. I don't.
There's also the trick of when you see something that you do like, stop looking at it right away and then try to redraw it. And a lot of times what you see in your mind might not be exactly what you saw, but your brain interpreted it one way, and what you might sketch out is something a little bit different.
Ooh, I like that. That sounds like a good exercise. Like a practice that, you know, would get you into figuring out the things that your brain caught. And filling in the rest.
You can
That's
also,
cool.
if you've looked at it too long and you know exactly what it is, you could also wait a certain amount of time, like the next day, then try to recreate that. And I almost guarantee you it's going to be a little bit different than what you saw the previous day.
Sure. That's cool. I like that a lot.
So Go ahead, Bob. You go. You bring
Well,
up
I was going to say, it's interesting to think about the difference there of like what your brain is. All of our brains work differently. We have different capacity for visualizing things. My wife needs to see something on a piece of paper in front of her to be able to really get the picture of what it is, what it's going to do, how it's going to end up looking or whatever. I have the ability to see pretty much a completed thing in my head before I'm working on this project. It's going to be out in a couple weeks. It's not super complicated, but it does have some there's moving parts to it. There's pieces that go together in different ways, and there's joinery. And I can see the entire thing in my head before I got to modeling it in Fusion or before I even sketched it. I can see it. I can see all the pieces. I can move around it. I can move it. I can, getting that thing out of my head to the computer or to a paper, that's where it starts to break down a little bit for me. Like, that's the hard thing. But seeing it is totally easy. And I know other people who design two-dimensional objects, who do graphic design and stuff, they can do the same thing. They can see the entire thing in their head before they ever start, and then it's just a matter of executing it and refining it and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's just weird to think about how differently we handle stuff like that, and where the translation part is difficult for some people at the very beginning, some people it's at the very end. And
I'll tell you my experience. I was thinking about this conversation we were about to have, and I was thinking about the 3 videos I did this week. For instance, the first video was the repairing the tombstone, but the second video more specifically was I had to make I realized I was running out of time to make the obligation for this ad that was in there, and they it has to happen in October, otherwise you don't get paid. And I was like, okay, so I need a quick, impactful video. And I say something. So I've been experimenting with pouring brass, and hot molten brass looks good. What am I going to make? So I started thinking to myself, I want to make a plaque, something that's simple. I don't want to make something too complicated because the mold's going to be complicated. And then one thing led to another, and I'm like, oh, it's Halloween, so maybe I can make a skull with logos. But why do I need a logo? Why do I need a skull? It has to be a reason for it. And then I came to, after Google searching images, door knocker. And that's when last week I said I was going to make a door knocker. Something came up quick, but the whole thing was dictated by something quick, something impactful. And I was like, okay, lately I've been playing with casting. Okay, now I zeroed it in from something quick. Okay, casting is quick. Okay, I got to make a former, which is the mold. That'll be quick. I can make up something easy. But what could it be? And then I started playing around with. So when it comes to designing an object, in that case, time was one of the most critical things because I needed to do a one-day video. I needed to do a one-day build. Something impactful, fire and melted metal looks cool. And then I got to make an object. So you could see how it happened. Whereas in another time and place without a crunch, I might be like, I want to make a door knocker. How could I make a door knocker? I could 3D print it. I could send it out. I could have somebody cast it. I could make it out of plasma cut steel and just assemble it with welding. What could a door knocker be? And then, so it depends on how you get there, the path. That's why when the comment people are always like, well, why didn't you just do this? They have no idea the meandering path it took for me to get to that.
Yeah.
And same thing with the Bowie knife. I sent 4 images to Carolina Shoes, 4 completely different sketches that were coffin related, skull related, because of the boots have the skull on them and they wanted to promote them during Halloween. And I came up with this coffin-shaped toolbox that was all shiny silver. I was going to TIG weld this beautiful coffin-shaped toolbox. So it would have been a toolbox that you open up and it have a tray in it, and the whole thing would have been shaped like a toe pincher coffin. And one of the images was the Bowie knife. And they said, we like the Bowie knife the most. I was like, cool. So I took the coffin thing, toolbox, and I made that square aluminum toolbox for my cameras. So that idea was originally going to be a coffin toolbox out of shiny, shiny aluminum that I happen to have sitting around. So the impetus for that was the shiny aluminum.
That's always magical when one thing turns into another thing.
Yeah. So the shiny aluminum was going to be this coffin-shaped toolbox. It would have looked really shiny. And I put images of like the shiny aluminum. They're like, that's cool, but why don't we do the knife would be cool? Because they, bring the knife videos sometimes tend to do well. And then when I was making the knife, I was like, okay, there's skulls. It's Halloween. Again, same thing. Halloween. It happened to be the same couple days. And so that's why I ended up with the boots, 2 boots, skull on each side of the boot, 2 skulls. And so I made the guard have 2 little skulls on it, and I hand carved the skulls with a Dremel tool, which is a subject for the after show.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times a 3D object is dictated by circumstance. It could be dictated by the material you want to play with, the process you want to play with. I have some stuff here. The texture, subject matter. It's really open. You got to really, as a good designer, you got to be open to all those different things. Like when you find a cool texture, like it's funny. Years ago I dated a person that made clothes, and every time we would meet somebody new, she would reach out and like touch the corner of their shirt to feel the texture of the fabric. And she got me doing it. So like when we'd bump into a friend and she'd be like, "Oh, I like that shirt," and she'd just reach and touch the corner. She's like, I just want to feel the fabric, what it feels like. And so another good example is this leather bag that I've been selling. The design criteria was, everybody likes when I make a leather bag. Make me one. I can't sew the same thing twice and have it be perfect. I'm not Hermes or Coach bag maker. I make 2 bags exactly the same pattern. The stitch pattern looks different. The last where I end the stitch is going to look horrible. So I said, I want to design a bag that I can make a lot of. They'll always be basically exactly the same. They have to go together easily, because if I'm going to make a lot of them, they have to go together easily. And then I remembered my old idea where I did this tab and clip thing. I was like, let me get back to that. Tim Belcher is a friend of mine who took that idea when I first came up with it and said, hey, can I explore this tab and slot idea? I said, sure. So when I went back to Tim, he had spent a lot of time and energy designing the nuances of the slot and tab, especially when it comes to parametric design using Fusion. So he could make a shape, change it a little bit, and then the tabs will space themselves out correctly, or the thickness will be adjusted. So I knew Tim had spent a lot of time on that, from a more of a technical point of view where I don't have that ability. I said, I want to redesign this bag. I hand sew this shape that everybody loves. I want to take that same shape, but do it with the link and locks. And so that was designed by circumstance as well. I didn't just say, I want to design a bag that has links and locks. It really came around about, I want to do something that I could assemble quickly, I could make a lot of, it's easy to make, they'll always be the same. It's sort of like a Henry Ford model where I could make 10 of them in the same day, and you could pick any one of the 10 and it'll be the same as any of the other 9. But good quality, thick leather. I'm making this out of 10-ounce leather, these bags. And last night I sat with some friends in the fashion business, and one of them said, it's a little heavy. Her point of view is it's a little too heavy for like most women. I was like, well, I want to make a unisex bag. And I said, I also want to make a bag that's extremely sturdy, feels expensive, and stands up. For me, that's one of the most important things, is that when you use a canvas bag, if you put it down and it just flops over on its side, it drives me bananas. Like when you put it down on your car seat, you want to be able to grab those handles in space right where they were before. It's another design criteria. And my friend at Weaver said, it's funny that I'm making bags out of this 8, 9, 10-ounce leather. She said, nobody buys this leather to make bags out of. They only buy it to make belts and saddles out of. It's too thick for bags. It's definitely too thick to sew on a consistent basis, but you could link it together. And so this design solution works. I'm just using these examples of how you meander through different ways of getting to where you got to get to for 3D objects. It could be material, process, idea when it comes to imagery. Like again, with the door knocker, I could have gone 10 different ways with the door knocker. I could have made one out of wood. It would have worked fine. I could have just stopped at the wood. If I was just making one of them, it doesn't matter. Make it out of a sturdy wood that's going to withstand the elements. I have a covered porch. I could have made it out of any kind of wood. It would have been fine, most likely.
I think,
but it's the process that dictated that. Good.
I think there's a reason why there's no books or no tutorials on a 10-step process to make a logo or a thing. It's because, like what Jimmy's saying, the material, the process all dictates that, and then Bob was saying some people are visual. Some people can see everything at the end, and some people cannot, and you have to work your way through it. It's a really hard question to answer. How do you design a logo when it's different for everybody?
Right. And I think from listening to you all, it's possible for me in particular that I may be going too open-ended on my goal. I think with, designing a cool t-shirt maybe is just too broad of a thing, because both of you have said that the constraint or the situational details cause the thing, whether it's like, what the company does causes the logo, or what materials you're using causes the product. And so maybe I just need to set up even fake criteria for myself. That's like, I want to make a t-shirt that has a tree, or that's like outdoorsy, or that's like a car related thing, or whatever, just to put some constraint that I have to work around. Maybe that'll help.
I think constraints on anything, whether it's logo design, layout, woodworking, metalworking, leatherworking, I think the constraints, starting with an open, anything could happen type thing, is it's just too broad, and you're just going to stare at a blank page way too long. I think nailing down the constraints helps everyone, at least me, become a better designer.
Yeah. Well, I think those constraints are natural. Then they happen naturally in a lot of situations. Like, if you're designing a machine to do a thing, well, it has constraints built into it. It has to do the thing. And so that's naturally there. And I think just when you get into the art for art's sake thing, that's where I'm like, because I don't like, what's the constraint? It has to be awesome. Well, that's not specific enough. So yeah, I think that will probably help me. And then I really like the thing that you said about looking away and letting your brain kind of fill in and trying to recreate something. That sounds like a really cool thing to try. So I'm definitely going to give that a shot.
You know what I used to tell my students all the time? I would say, you're think of yourselves as inventors. Think of yourselves as visual inventors. You're inventing an image. You're inventing a communication. And that's really important to remember, that you're communicating. You're communicating either with a logo or with a 3D object. And what is it you want to communicate? And a lot of times I'm communicating inspiration, and I'm also communicating. It doesn't have to be perfect, because a lot of my things are like, if you see the critical trolling and not trolling comments, the critical comments on my knife, it's like, it's not polished enough. It's not this enough. The handle's too short. But I'm not going for perfection. I'm going for an overall, like, I'm going through the process. When I'm not making a video and I don't have time constraints, I will make the most perfect knife. When it's just me alone in the forge and the grinder and the sharpening tools, I'll make the most perfect knife. But here I'm just communicating, get started, do it, just stop thinking. I made the joke one day, I'm finally ready to be perfect. What is it you're communicating with what you're working on, what you're trying to say? What are you trying to communicate?
Yeah.
And again, going back to the business cards, you don't want to be that one-man band that has a big bass drum on his belly, cymbals between his knees, his feet connected to strings that hit cymbals that hang on sticks over his head. You don't necessarily want to be that guy with your communication, unless you really are that guy, then that's fine. But when it comes to a business card or a logo that has the one-man band stuff imagery on it, you always want to kind of cut through it all and get to the root of it. What is it you really want to communicate? I make things. Yeah. I'm a carpenter. I'm a musician. I'm a stonemason. Like, what is the root of that?
When I went to school, it wasn't called graphic design. It was called visual communication. And like when Jimmy said, "What are you trying to communicate?" That's like the most important thing, and probably should have been the very first thing that was said. What are you trying to communicate? Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's what you could, if you're doing a client, you could do a client, or if when you're making a video, for instance, the aluminum toolbox that I ended up making, it went from being a coffin shape to just a practical toolbox. And then as I was making it, I said, am I going to make a perfect square or perfect rectangular shape? And I thought, is that boring? I was like, well, I'm trying to communicate precision. right? Precision. I'm not a precision welder, but I'm trying to be. And if I make a perfect square, it doesn't have that humped roof or that gambrel roof on most toolboxes have. This way, it's just a square. There's something sexy about a perfect square. I have an old Araflex camera box that is a perfect big giant 1940 square. And I always like look at it and go, that's like, it says something to me, that perfect aluminum. It's all stamped aluminum. It's not welded. But there's something cool about that perfect square, and you open it up and there's a big giant antique movie camera in it. And so that box inspired me to make this box. And that's why I put camera gear in it. It's something about that perfect square that says clean. It's not overthought. It's just exact. It's like in service to me, that perfect square. And these are the types of things these are the emotions that were coming up as I was refining exactly how I was going to do it.
Yeah. When Jimmy says,
and like the perfect window, the perfect square window, it's like you almost don't want to see it, but it's almost like a surprise that it's there. It's obviously visible, but the perfect square for the bottom drawer. Go ahead, Dave.
When Jimmy says, always be open, it's a behavioral change that you have to make in yourself to, like, anytime I'm out and about, I'm taking in design, and I'm taking in, I like that element. I could be at Target, and I am still absorbing all the stuff that I'm seeing. It could be graphic design. It could be a piece of furniture that I saw. It could be, Target has these weird, freaky looking mannequins with no faces. And I'm just like, those things are so freaking cool. I want one for my home. But it's always being open. And it's a hard thing to say and teach, because it's a behavioral thing that you have to teach yourself.
Yeah. You always have to be open. You always have to be curious, always be more input, more output. More input, better output. You got to remember that.
I like that.
It always boggles my mind when somebody who is an artist does not pay any attention to anything around them. And I'm like, you're not doing yourself justice by just, like, I don't know, looking into your phone or whatever it is.
Yeah.
You can look into your phone anyway, but here you are at, for instance, Target. There's so many interesting things to see. And, Target really prides themselves on design. So when I'm in a Target, for instance, just because it came up, I'm always looking around. I'm like, okay, they're really making very conscious decisions about everything. From the carts. They're not just buying random carts. They make their own big plastic bulky carts, the bag, the POS, the point of purchase systems. Everything is thought through. So when I'm in a Target, I'm just like looking around going, hopefully some of that organizational branding rubs off on me. It never does, but that's kind of the motion. So it's important to really be aware of your surroundings, especially if you're in an inspirational place like Home Depot, Lowe's, even Walmart. These places, for better or for worse, are definitely dictating a lot of what we do and say. And
sure. Cool. Well, thank you guys. That was helpful.
That was fun. I learned.
Yeah. And I think we could probably talk about a specific thing within that, probably even deeper.
Yeah, for sure.
Remember we used to brainstorm projects. We should do that again.
Oh yeah.
People always like those shows.
Yep.
I listened to Mark and Sam. What's that?
Come up with an idea. I said not it. You all can come up with an idea.
No, I listened to Mark and Sam, Sam Morrell and Mark Norman, comedian podcast. We Might Be Drunk. And at the end of every show, they talk about premises, and they try and come up with a comedic point of view. Like, I've been thinking about, I don't know, computers lately and how they XYZ, and then they turn it into like a bit. They try and develop a bit, like Live on the Air, which is really interesting to hear how their design process for it comes to comedy.
Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned that. I heard somebody else recently. It was Mr. Beast. He got together with a few other creators around his size, and they just went into a cabin, and then they, for a couple days, and just like brainstormed ideas for each other, with each other. And I was like, man, that would be really nice to just find like 8 other people who kind of do what I do, or maybe doesn't do anything that I do, and we just come up with project and video ideas. And you probably walk away with years worth of projects after a weekend in a cabin stuck where that's your main goal. That's my invite.
I mean, that's
to you
really
too.
interesting, because
let's go get a cabin.
Because all those people that you would be with would have a different set of input. I mean, they're going to be injecting the input they got into an idea for you. Like, yeah, that's pretty cool. Cool. Well, thank you guys for that. And I also want to say thank you to our Patreon supporters, because we have a group of people that have supported the show for a really long time. We always have new people coming on, and really grateful for everybody. This week, we have a new big patron, one of our top supporters, Adam Grove. Adam, thank you for jumping on at the top level.
Hello. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam.
Adam jumps in with Crabtree Creative, Web Ranch Specialties, Michael Menedgen, Warren Works, The New Janky Workshop, Scott at Dad It Yourself, Sean Beckner, Odin Leather Goods, Rich at Low End Designs, Chad's Custom Creations, Chad from Mancrafting, good to see you, Chad, Works by Solo, good to see you, Bernie, Albert's Woodworks, and Corey Ward. But there's also a bunch of other people like Max King of Camp Arrowhead, I think joined up this week. Is another one of our new patrons. They all get the after show. They all get the extra podcast where Jimmy's going to tell us how much he hates Dremel tools this week. And
that's absolutely
there's always secret, unique, different stuff in the after show. All the patrons get that at any level. So if you want to join that group, go to patreon.com/makingit and join up. We would greatly appreciate it. All right. What do you guys have to recommend this week?
Oh, I have this popped up, and I watched maybe 5 or 6 of them in a row. It's a YouTube channel called Big Company. Let me see. I never even went to their channel page. I just keep following one after another. Big Company. They only have 283,000 subscribers, which obviously is a big deal. Seems like a new company, but it's all about the history of how automobile companies get started. It's amazing. It's the tragic story of the Dodge brothers, how a poor boy created Mercedes-Benz, how a poor Korean boy created Hyundai, the tragic story of Bentley, the disturbing history of Porsche, how Warren Buffett made his fortune. It's not all car related, but it seems like this person. The orphan boy who created Rolex. I haven't watched that yet. And that's all the movies. It's only this channel's only a year old. And these videos are great. The poor farmer that created Walmart. And it's amazing. It's like we talked about how can somebody start a small company. I talked about it with this leather bag as my subject matter. How can somebody start a little company and then in 100 years from now you go, oh, he was just making leather bags for tool makers around the neighborhood, and then one thing led to another. Now it's a giant billion-dollar company. Like, how does it go from that to that? And then, for instance, he says the tragic story of Bentley, who was a guy who was designing motors, got into the company, and then, because he kept needing money, he kept taking, and then all of a sudden he worked on the factory line. He was no longer the owner, or he started a brand that kind of took off without his. And then same thing happened to Louis Chevrolet. He helped start a company, Chevy Motors, out of racing. A lot of these car companies started because everybody had a big passion for racing. And then one thing led to another, and he was like bought out of the company. And then, like 40 years old, he worked on the assembly line and died penniless. It's like crazy. Wow. So this is just great stories about things that we always wonder how you got there. Same thing, like you see a beautiful logo. How did you get there? How did you get there?
Yeah.
I just started watching the one on Ford this morning. Big Company. I'll send you one of the videos.
Cool.
So, excuse me. All my uncles and my dads, they always talked about the there's just one dad.
I got you.
But they always talked about all the cars that they used to have that they still wish they had. And I think about that all the time with when I went to school for graphic design, all the textbooks that I had, and I kept for at least 10, 12 years. But then I needed the money sometime early in the 2000s, so I sold all my textbooks. And I wish I still had them, because there's a classic typography book that I should rebuy or whatever. But I collect books. I love books. And this book is called 10 Principles of Good Design by Dieter Rams. And this isn't necessarily my pick. My pick is more about Dieter Rams' list of 10 Principles of Good Design. And you can just go look it up and you can see the 10 things. And it's Basically, I'm giving everybody homework to do for my pick. Just go look and see what those principles are, and use that and bring that into your projects.
Cool. Well, mine is a new video. We were talking about this before we started recording. New video by Peter McKinnon where he talks to.
Yep.
The guy's name is Renee. What's his last? Richie. Which I've seen him on different videos talking about YouTube stuff over the years, and I guess they met at VidSummit and then ended up talking in a crosswalk, and so they got together and shot this video all about like audience and algorithm stuff, and it's just like a really good. It was a good reminder to me to not look at the YouTube algorithm as this evil thing that's trying to make it difficult for you to do your job. You know, it is the correct perspective, I think, to talk about replace algorithm with audience.
Yeah,
because it's there to serve the audience, not to serve the creator.
I think that's the biggest
makes
thing.
sense.
YouTube is not there to serve creators. It is there to give content to viewers. He says it in a more elegant way, but that's like the biggest takeaway that from that is it's not there for creators, it's for viewers.
Yeah, which makes it a little less like, you know, hurtful
it's not
when
as
something
personal.
doesn't do well, because you're like, oh, well, yeah, it's not. I mean, it's not really about me, you know, because it's easy to forget that in our position. So, anyway, it was a good video. I mean, Peter's videos are always, you know, fun to watch anyway, but it was worth watching. I'm glad I watched that one. So, if you're a creator, go check it out.
Maybe it makes me hurt a little bit more because when I make a video that fails, that means my audience didn't care for it. We're not on the same page.
Yeah, but at the same time, like, my audience is a weird thing to try to define for yourself, because with the algorithm trying to serve viewers, you don't really have an audience. It's not about you having an audience. It's about audience having creators that they like to be fed, and those are maybe it's semantics, but I think those are a little bit different. You know, it's easy to get real like, these are the people that watch my videos, so I want to make things for them, or I want them to react in a certain way. But like, those people actually change all the time, and like, those people don't always get the opportunity to watch the video that you make and stuff like that. So I don't know. Yeah. All right, you guys got anything else for this week?
You know what? In the after show, I'll tell you. I went to VidSummit, and I'll tell you why I hated Peter McKinnon's panel that he was on. Yeah.
Ooh. Okay. I'm curious to hear this. Cool. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. And we're going to go so I can hear what David's going to say.
One last thing.
Yes.
I talk about what dictates a design. The other day, my local friend came into the shop and he saw the aluminum toolbox. He goes, "That's awesome." He goes, "You know what I have? I have 2 4x8 sheets of aluminum diamond plate that were accidentally delivered to my shop." There's another fab. He makes beautiful metalwork here. And he said, I didn't need them. I only use steel. I never use aluminum. I was like, "I'll buy them from you." I don't know what I'm going to do with them, but he just texted me the last 3 minutes. He's going to bring them over today. I'm buying them from him. 4x8 sheets of polished aluminum decking, like you'd see like on the tread of on like a step of a car, or like a step of the bumper of a fire truck. Polished aluminum. He said they're highly polished. They're really beautiful.
Okay, so not to be morbid, but you should make your own coffin out of diamond plate.
That would be
awesome.
That's a good idea. That's a good idea. So I'm going to make an aluminum coffin.
This is why we should have our little camp where we get together and just give each other ideas.
Yeah.
So Jeremy's going to bring that over later.
Cool. All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. Bye. Catch you next time.
Love you.
You got to say it louder. They didn't hear you.
I love you.